At the entrance to the Grand Cathedral, beneath towering arches and stained glass, a quiet man stood still clutching a single white rose. Elliot Eli Chambers, 85, wore a suit that had seen more funerals than celebrations, its fabric faded but carefully pressed. His hands trembled slightly, not from age alone, but from the weight of memory and loss. Today wasn't just another ceremony. It was the farewell of General Marcus Harrison, Eli's oldest and dearest friend. They had served side by side in the darkest corners of the Cold War. Eli, in Army intelligence, Harrison in command. But only one had ever stood in the spotlight. A young usher in a black suit and earpiece stopped him with a polite but firm tone. "I'm sorry, sir, this section is reserved for family and distinguished guests." "Your name isn't on the list." Eli offered a tired smile, lifting the rose slightly. "I'm not here for recognition. I just need a quiet seat to say goodbye to a friend." "I understand," the usher replied with mechanical courtesy, already scanning for someone more important. "Overflow seating is in the north transept, if there's room." No protest came. Eli nodded, turned slowly, and walked away, his back straighter than most expected from a man his age. But inside, something cracked. After all they'd survived together, covert missions, sleepless nights, decoding threats, years of unspoken loyalty, this was how it ended. Turned away because no file marked him as distinguished. His service was buried in classified files, invisible to the protocol clipboard in the usher's hand. He found a stone bench outside, shaded by a blooming dogwood tree. The organ's prelude drifted from inside the chapel, mingling with memories of shared missions and laughter over tin cups of coffee and mud-slick camps. Eli placed the white rose gently across his lap. He wasn't there to be seen. But still, something about the dismissal stung deeper than any war wound. It wasn't just that he had been turned away. It was that his friendship, his quiet sacrifice seemed to matter to no one. Not today, not here. And yet somewhere in the cathedral, someone had noticed. A bond forged long ago in service was about to speak louder than any protocol list. As Elliot Eli Chambers, alone in the courtyard, the weight of his solitude settled heavily on his shoulders. The garden was peaceful, the gentle sway of flowers and distant coo of doves at odds with the quiet ache pressing into his chest. The white rose in his lap trembled with the breeze, or perhaps from his hands. He had traveled 3 states for this moment, not for any ceremony or recognition, but for closure, to lay a rose at the funeral of the man who had once saved his life behind enemy lines and whose friendship had meant more than rank or medals. But protocol had no space for history written in whispers. Eli's name wasn't on the list. He wasn't family or distinguished. He had come not as a dignitary, but as a brother in arms. Still, he had been shown to the margins, ushered out of sight, and politely discarded, his service erased by a clipboard and a dress code. Inside the cathedral, the preparations for General Marcus Harrison's funeral proceeded with cold precision. Uniformed gleamed, dignitaries murmured in low voices, and floral arrangements were placed with meticulous care. Everyone inside had a name badge, a title, a rank. But no one inside knew who had intercepted a critical signal deep in East Berlin in '61 that saved American lives. No one knew whose quiet brilliance helped prevent an international catastrophe during a silent standoff in the Arctic. No one knew because those files were sealed, and Eli Chambers had never spoken of them, not even to his own family. And so there he was on a bench just out of sight. But not everyone had forgotten. From a distance, another man stood still at the chapel's side entrance. Command Sergeant Major Alan Kearns, retired now. Older and gray, but still sharp-eyed. He had once served as General Harrison's aide and remembered Eli well. He recognized the slope of his shoulders, the quiet humility, and the unmistakable weight of a man who had lived with secrets too heavy for medals. His heart clenched. It was a mistake, a failure of protocol, but worse, it was a failure of respect. Without hesitation, Kearns stepped away and placed a discreet but urgent call to someone who could make it right. General Alistair Finch, a 4-star general and Harrison's protege, who was preparing to deliver the eulogy. Kearns didn't need to say much. Just the facts: Eli Chambers is outside. Denied entry. He was Harrison's oldest friend. You know what that means. Inside the vestry, General Finch paused mid-sentence, the eulogy forgotten for the moment. His expression darkened, not with anger, but with purpose. Eli Chambers was not just a footnote in Harrison's life. He was part of the foundation. Finch turned to his aide. "Get me a microphone." Main chapel system. Now. Back in the garden, Eli sat quietly, unaware of the ripples his presence had caused. The pain of being dismissed still lingered. He wasn't angry he'd seen too much to waste energy on that, but he was hurt. Deeply. The kind of hurt that comes not from being forgotten, but from being unseen. Inside, the congregation was about to hear a voice they didn't expect. One that would stop the service before it began. One that would force everyone from generals to senators to reconsider what it meant to truly honor the legacy of a soldier and to recognize the quiet heroes like Eli Chambers, who never asked for anything but a place to remember those they loved. The silence was about to be broken not with fanfare but with truth. Inside the grand cathedral, the hush of anticipation was broken, not by the beginning of the service but by the sudden crackle of the PA system. The congregation stirred, glancing at each other in confusion. The organist paused mid-note. From the speakers came a calm but commanding voice, measured, composed, but laced with unmistakable steel. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is General Alistair Finch," it began. The room stiffened. General Finch wasn't supposed to speak until the eulogy. But there was no mistaking the tone. This was no ceremonial announcement. This was something urgent. There has been a serious oversight. Finch continued, his voice echoing beneath the cathedral's soaring arches. One of General Harrison's oldest and dearest comrades, Mr. Elliot Chambers, has been denied entry to this chapel due to an administrative error. He is currently sitting alone in the courtyard holding a white rose, believing he was unworthy of entry. Let me be clear. He is not only worthy, he is essential. A collective breath caught in the congregation. Those seated near the front, the high-ranking officials, the diplomats, the Heritage family began to shift uncomfortably. This was not part of the program. Finch's voice grew firmer. Mr. Chambers served alongside General Harrison from the earliest days of their military careers. His contributions to this nation's security that may never be publicly acknowledged, but they were and remain profound. General Harrison often referred to Mr. Chambers as the bravest man he'd ever known. To exclude him from this service is not just a failure of protocol. It is a betrayal of the very loyalty we claim to honor here today. The gravity in his words fell like a stone through water. Outside, Eli Chambers lifted his head, confused, as the PA system reached the garden. He froze when he heard his name, heard himself described in a way no one had spoken aloud in decades. His heart pounded not from pride but from shock. He had spent a lifetime fading into the background, and now in this sacred space of remembrance, a four-star general was calling him forward not as a guest but as a brother. Inside, General Finch concluded, "This service will not begin until Mr. Chambers is seated not in the overflow, but here in the front pew where General Harrison would have wanted him. We will wait." Silence followed, heavy, reverent. Then murmurs of awe and humility passed through the chapel. The protocol staff stood frozen, their authority swiftly and utterly overridden. Moments later, the cathedral's great side doors opened, and a young army captain, ramrod, straight, and solemn face, stepped into the courtyard. He approached Eli with a mix of apology and respect. "Mr. Chambers, sir," he said, saluting. "General Finch sends his sincerest apologies and requests your presence inside the chapel. He has personally reserved your seat." Eli looked down at the rose in his hand. The pain of being forgotten moments ago now softened by something greater acknowledgement. Not for his records or medals, but for who he was and what he represented. Quiet loyalty, steadfast brotherhood. With the captain's gentle guidance, Eli stood. He moved slowly but with quiet strength as they walked back through the doors that had once shut him out. The same ushers who had dismissed him earlier now stepped aside, heads lowered. The congregation, sensing the moment, rose silently as he entered. Senators, admirals, even the foreign dignitaries. All stood in respect for the man with the white rose and the unshakable heart. A chain of loyalty had been activated not just through rank but through honor, through memory, through the sacred bond that no list or invitation could define. As Elliot Chambers stepped through the towering arched doorway of the cathedral, escorted by the young army captain, time seemed to hold its breath. The hush that fell across the congregation was absolute, an unnatural stillness in a room usually accustomed to order, routine, and reverence. But this was different. This was not silence born of tradition. It was a silence born of realization. Every seat was filled, every uniform polished, every ribbon and medal glinting under the warm amber light filtering through stained glass. But no one moved. From senators to generals, cabinet secretaries to foreign dignitaries, every person stood as Elliot passed down the center aisle, his steps slow but steady, his hands still clutching the single white rose meant for his friend. It was not merely an old man walking. It was a reckoning. General Alistair Finch, standing near the pulpit, offered a small but meaningful nod, one warrior to another. He had paused the entire funeral for this moment, and now that choice was affirmed in the eyes of all present. As Elliot reached the front pew, the Harrison family stood to greet him. General Harrison's son, a brigadier general himself, extended his hand with emotion welling in his eyes. "My father spoke of you often, Mr. Chambers," he said softly. "You were more than a friend. You were his brother." Elliot nodded, his throat too tight for words. The captain gestured to a cleared seat beside the family, the very place reserved for those closest to the departed. Elliot sank into the seat slowly, carefully, the white rose now resting gently in his lap. And then, almost in perfect synchronicity, the entire room sat again. Not a rustle, not a cough, just the echo of reverence lingering in the air. At the pulpit, General Finch took a brief step forward. This morning he began, his voice steady and rich with gravity. "We gather to honor the life and service of General Michael Harrison." But before we continue, let us take a moment to reflect on the power of quiet loyalty, the kind that never seeks recognition, yet defines our highest ideals. He gestured gently toward Elliot. Mr. Chambers was not on the official guest list. He wore no uniform, carried no title, and yet his presence here has reminded us all of something vital: that true friendship forged in the crucible of service cannot be measured in protocol. It lives in our actions, our sacrifices, and in the bonds that endure long after the last salute. There were no dry eyes among the front rows now. Even the junior ushers, once rigid in procedure, stood with softened expressions, realizing the gravity of what they had nearly denied. Finch continued, "Let this moment serve as a lasting example that the quiet heroes among us may not always wear medals or stand behind podiums, but their courage, loyalty, and humility are what truly hold our nation together." He stepped back. The organist resumed softly, the first notes of Amazing Grace weaving through the stillness like a prayer. Elliot sat motionless, not out of fear or discomfort, but out of sheer awe. Never had he expected this. He had come only to say goodbye, but he had been seen, truly seen, for the first time in decades. And in the most sacred of moments, among the most powerful of leaders, his service, his sacrifices, his very presence had frozen a room in reverence. No praise, no speeches, just one man, one rose, and a memory honored. As Elliot Chambers stepped out of the cathedral that afternoon, the single white rose no longer felt like a token of loss. It felt like a symbol of legacy. He had come to say goodbye to an old friend, but he left having been reminded that service, loyalty, and quiet sacrifice are never truly forgotten. In the eyes of those who witnessed that moment when a four-star general stopped an entire ceremony to right a wrong, Elliot wasn't just an old man in a worn suit. He was a living chapter of a history too precious to ignore. That day became more than a funeral. It became a lesson, a reminder that true honor doesn't fade with time, and friendship forged in the crucible of service can echo louder than any official list. Sometimes the most powerful words are not spoken in front of cameras or crowds, but in actions like standing for a man who spent a lifetime standing for others. So let us take this to heart. Never judge by appearances. Never underestimate the quiet ones. And never let protocol silence what's right. If this story moved you, leave a comment with the word honor below to show your support for veterans like Elliot. And if you believe in remembering the unseen heroes who shaped our nation with courage and humility, subscribe to this channel for more stories that matter. Because sometimes the greatest lessons come not from speeches, but from who we choose to stand up for.